Good day everybody, CO62 Gaming, also known as Station on Phoenix server, and welcome to the Beginner's Warrior Guide. Before we begin, I would like to mention that this is a beginner's guide, and as such will probably not be of any use to any endgame players. This is meant as a tool for helping new players get accustomed to the warrior job. I also want to mention that the tanking meta in 14 is very different than most MMOs out there. A tank is not just a bunch of HP that's supposed to shield his party. In 14, the tank is also the core of the offense, being the only player in most cases that have a close to 100% uptime on the boss. Expect having to pull your weight in the damage department as well. A tank can be around 3/4 of an extra DPS in a 4-man party when played to its maximum efficiency. So that damage does make a difference. The warrior is one of Final Fantasy's 3 tank jobs, and is highly focused on dealing damage. With the right mindset, it can become a dangerous foe or an invaluable ally. Let's go over some of the basic gameplay. It has a lot of synergies between dealing damage and tanking, and a lot of its defensive cooldowns can aid in its damaging capabilities, and vice versa. The warrior's main mechanic is the Wrath and Abandon stacks. At level 30 and 52 you gain Defiance and Deliverance respectively. When in one of these stances, certain abilities and weapon skill will grant you a stack of Wrath or Abandon depending on which stance. These stacks give a slight bonus, but their main use is being consumed by one of your job-specific skills. This makes Warrior a job that constantly builds up and cashes in resources for a very free-flowing experience. For a Warrior, you want to look for tank gear. This is gear specifically made for tanks and can only be used by tanks. If the gear piece says it can be used by Dragoon and Lancer or Disciple of War, it is not tank gear, and in case you keep your gear up to date, you should never use that gear piece. This is not true for accessories, since these are universal though. Since the 3.2 patch, you should prioritize vitality in all cases after weapon damage, and as of the making of this video, the 12th of May 2016, parry is next to useless to warriors and should not be stacked. Cross-class skills should be pretty straightforward with some variation. Provoke is mandatory. If you're planning to participate in any higher level of content, it is expected of you to at least have Provoke. After that, Internal Release and Convalescence is very good to have on a warrior, since they really complement the warrior's own toolbox. The remaining 2 slots are more of a personal taste. The cross-classes I would recommend for these slots are Flash, because of 2 reasons. The pacification from Berserk, and if you had to panic over power spam to keep enmity on a big pole. For the last slot, I would personally want Awareness. The reason is that it is amazing and a lifesaver when paired with Raw Intuition in fights where you cannot guarantee that you can face the same direction. But it also has a lot more strength than people give it credit for. The way that this game checks for crits and parries is that if the attack is a crit, it will not even check if you can parry it or not. As such, the more crits you can avoid, the higher the chance for parry. Though, pay in mind, this does not make parry a valuable stat. I will now break down the skills you get at each level in level ranges. So I'll begin with level 15 and the skills you get to that point, then I'll go to 30 and so on. Level 15. At this point, you don't have very much to go on except your heavy swing into Skull Sunder and Overpower. Generally, you want to open up with a Tomahawk, or in some cases Overpower, from maximum range while running up to the enemy. After that, you go into 2 or 3 Overpower to establish enmity, or go directly into your Skull Sunder combo if it's a single target. And don't forget to keep Fracture up, and refresh it when it's less than 3 seconds left. You also have Brutal Swing, which is a stun. If the enemy needs to be stunned, save it for those occasions. But whenever the enemy is immune to or is not needed to be stunned, go to town with it and use it on CD for extra damage. Do not forget to use Foresight when taking physical damage, and don't be afraid to use it on smaller pulls. Any bit of mitigation at any point can ease the load on your healers, allowing them to maybe go into cleric stance in DPS, or just throw out an extra arrow dot. The last thing to mention for this level range is Bloodbath. Use it when you can, unless you are at full HP and have no use for it. Also, it's amazing when used together with overpower against multiple foes. Just remember to keep some TP for emergency. You don't want an ad to spawn while you can't act. Level 30. You should have Maim, which should be up at all times unless there are no enemies. 3 damage is best damage. At this point you also have Butcher's Block, which combos off Skull Sunder and is the warrior's highest potency combo. But don't forget to prioritize keeping Maim and Fracture up first. Mercy Stroke is your execute type ability and should be used at every opportunity available to you. If you can make it the finishing blow, sure, it may be worth it, but don't waste the use of it just because you saved it. You get Berserk as well at this level and range, which is kind of the warrior's signature skill. It greatly increases your damage by 50%, and because of certain skills like Bloodbath can give you large amounts of HP back, so it's actually of use to tanking as well. But beware of the pacification effect at the end of it. It can literally get your healers killed. If possible, you should try to use it just before a 2nd or 3rd tier combo hit, to gain the most of the damage increase. Also, try to combine it with other abilities and see the synergy. Later on when you get them, you can add Vengeance to slay big pulls, add Bloodbath and tell your healer to go make a cup of tea, add Unchain for damage and add Fell Cleave and watch as your Dragoon jumps off a cliff out of shame. LOL Dragoon everyone. Here's also a little trick you can do to extend the duration slightly. Since our GCDs tends to be around 2.2 to 2.4 seconds, depending on how good itemization we have, you can gain an extra ability by using Berserk just before your next GCD instead of just after a GCD. This, so to speak, extends the effective use of Berserk by around 1.5 to 2 seconds, depending on animation and latency. When you unlock the warrior job, you are also given your first stance and access to the warrior's stack mechanic, Defiance. Defiance should be up whenever you are tanking at early levels and until you get more proficiency with the game and the job. But when you get more skilled, you may turn it off for a few seconds to get extra damage output while you are not taking much damage. An example of this would be bosses like Manor Claviger in Hulk Manor, that stops a cast every now and then. Just make sure you know that you aren't going to take any big damage. Try to keep it to auto attacks if you can. Additionally, whenever you are in a stance, you will build up stacks of Wrath and Abandon. These are primarily a resource to use some of your most powerful weapon skills, so check through what builds these stacks and memorize it. Level 50, the old endgame. So your last 2 weapon skills are both comboed from Maim, Storm's Eye and Storm's Path. Eye is one of your most important abilities and should be up 100% since it increases your damage, the other tank's damage and any ninja's damage, and it further allows ninjas to use more Eolian edges for more damage output. Path on the other hand can be amazing but tends to be forgotten. It heals you and decreases the target's damage. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Problem is that because of the damage heavy meta, in some cases it's more beneficial to just use Butcher's Block for the damage, or Enmity, because the better the DPS, the easier they pull off you. I'd recommend establishing an Enmity lead by Block, and then rotate Eye to Path, and leaving out Butcher's Block combo unless you need extra damage or Enmity. By now you have a lot of different tools at your disposal to increase your group's damage and survivability. Among these are Thrill of Battle. This ability increases and heals you for 20% of your max HP for 20 seconds. Further increased to 20% after level 44. Despite seeming at a first glance somewhat pointless, it can be one of your most important cooldowns to keep at hand. The first use is to give you an extra shield by making sure that newly granted HP is taken instead of your original. It can also be seen as a heal, but this is kind of a waste of a good cooldown. The real power of Thrill is when combined with Convalescence. This combination simulates your Defiance stance, allowing you to turn off Defiance while still keeping your tankiness. Unless very large of damage is incoming, then you better be in Defiance. Better safe than sorry. Another powerful tool is Vengeance. Not only does it reduce 30% of all damage taken, it also deals a 50 potency attack back to any physical attacker and builds a stack. This should however never be burned for only the stack unless you can guarantee that you won't take any damage for at least 2 minutes. Then we have Holmgang. This is our hallowed ground living dead equivalent. Holmgang fully enforces its namesake. It draws the enemy in and binds them, and you become unable to go below 1 HP by almost any attack. Some exceptions exist though. Shock Strike is a good example if you've seen our remove farming video. Let's not talk about that anymore. Also, the bind and drawing is mostly useless against bosses in PvE, but can be a lifesaver in PvP. In organized content, it can be used as an amazing defensive cooldown. Just make sure that your healers give you a heal so you don't die to an auto attack afterwards. Before we go into the stack consumers, let's mention Infuriate. This ability can save your whole group from a wipe if used properly. It immediately grants you 5 stacks of Wrath or Abandon. So let's talk about the stack's usage. In Defiance you have 3 skills that consumes your stack: Inner Beast, Steel Cyclone, and Unchained. Steel Cyclone is your "the black mage doesn't have quelling strikes and has pulled all the mobs off me" button. It is a good amount of damage, ignores Defiance damage penalty, and has increased energy generation. Still, black mages, please get quelling strikes, I thank you. Inner Beast is one of the most outstanding warrior tools. It's a weapon skill, so it's on GCD, but this also means it has no internal cooldown timer, and as such can be used whenever 5 stacks are present, and you are in Defiant stance. Not only does it deal more damage than Butcher's Block, it ignores the damage penalty of Defiance, heals you for 100% of the damage dealt, it also reduces damage taken by 20% for 6 seconds. Holy cows, is this weapon skill amazing. It can in theory be up for almost every single mechanic damage. Finally, there's Unchained. This ability removes the damage penalty on Defiance for 20 seconds. And is just ridiculously powerful, especially when you stand stance for optimized damage and survivability. Level 60, the expansion. So you finally made it to the skies and are now going Heavensward? Yep, that was a bad pun. So the first skill you get in the expansion is Deliverance. This is the counterpart to Defiance. It has none of Defiance's benefits or penalties. It just increases damage by 5%. And it also switches existing Wrath stacks and Wrath stacks that you would have built to Abandon stacks. As well as grants you 2 more damage focused versions of Inner Beast and Steel Cyclone. Decimate is the Steel Cyclone equivalent. Think of it as a Butcher's Block to every single target in range. The deeps, man. And then there is Felcleave. It's a single target weapon skill, just like Inner Beast, but it has no additional effect, and why would it? It has a potency of 500! That's only 25 potency shy of a Black Mage's Fire 4 at 3 stacks of Astral Fire. You also get Raw Intuition, which further makes your parry stat useless as warriors. Raw Intuition makes you parry all physical attacks from the front while making damage from any other direction a critical hit on you, so watch your back and sides. It additionally grants a stack, but like Vengeance should not be burnt just for the stack. Unless the boss won't hit you, or in the case of parry only working on physical attack, if the boss is primarily or only using magic, remove is a good example on this. Raw Intuition can be used as a free stack, just watch out for the critical hits. And for the grand finale, Equilibrium. The most busted and amazing and powerful move in our kit for just a 60-second cooldown. Well, not really, but it feels that way. While in Defiance, it heals us for 1200 potency, which can be further increased when combined with Berserk and Unchained. I've seen 12k self-heals with this. Trust me, your healers will go and cry in a corner. And if that wasn't enough, make way in the corner healer, the melee DPS need the corner as well. Warriors are already very TP efficient when played properly. But to make it worse, when using Equilibrium in Deliverance, instead of giving you a heal, it restores 200 TP. This allows that when combined with Pacification, and in some cases a boss being untargetable, like Titan or A4, it allows the warrior to use sprint mid-combat without any drawbacks. Trust me, your melee DPS will cry. This has saved me countless times during Titan runs while off tanking. Just make sure you don't need a heal within a minute first. So there we go. That's the Beginner's Warrior Guide. If you want more advanced tips and advice, I'd recommend looking for other guides or get in contact, either on Phoenix server as Taehyun or in the comment section below. This was CF62. May you ever walk in the light of crystal.